You can do anything you want in the world of pro wrestling. If you want to be a porn star, you can. If you want to be a dead person, you can. And if you want to be a multicolored turkey, that's right, you can. The rules are more like guidelines, and if you can come up with a dumb idea others will sign off on, then go nuts. It'll either go swimmingly, or you'll be resigned to being featured in lists like this. Despite this creative freedom, however, a lot of performers do turn to real life to find inspiration for their in-ring gimmicks. Kinda makes sense. If you're watching the news and something triggers those creative wires in your brain, why not see if you can't tweak it a touch to make your fortune? Again, if it fails, we'll just all laugh at you. I'm Simon from What Culture, and this is 10 WWE gimmicks which ripped off real people. Number 10, Karma. Based on, apparently, Kimo Leopoldo, a man who could be seen in the UFC, the whole reason for this is that Charles Wright looked a bit like him. Yep. There was no MMA-based skills or a love of the sport spurring this on, there was a vague similarity, so why not make Karma a mixed martial artist? Dubbed as the Supreme Fighting Machine, the Once Papa Shango didn't really do anything different, and this was very much a gimmick in name only. On top of that, it didn't exactly scream main event, and if anything, undermined wrestling as a whole. If this guy was actually legit, what did that make everybody else? It flopped until Wright decided to change his look once again, and found mad success as a pimp. Remember what I said at the start? Can literally do whatever you want. Number 9, Steve Austin. As we all know, when Steve Austin was brought in by WWE, he was handed the Ringmaster gimmick and his future in that promotion was set. Ted DiBiase's stooge was never going to be a main eventer. Then the $1 Million Man left for WCW, leaving Austin in no man's land. He needed something new. The question was what, ironically. Realizing this was a chance to make a difference, Austin went to work on his character before seeing a piece of Richard Kuklinski, a serial killer. Known for freezing in victims so authorities wouldn't know the time of death, he was soon dubbed as the Iceman. Austin would study his mannerisms meticulously and bring that into his act. Soon his then wife would tell him to not let his tea get stone cold, and the final piece of the puzzle was set. This was good too, because when Austin had pitched Iceman to creative, the name he got back was Chili McFreeze. And Chili McFreeze was never going to go on to change the business. Number 8, the Nation of Domination. When Ron Simmons was brought into the WWE, everything just went crazy for a while. Despite being the first official African-American NWA champion, Vince McMahon saw him more as a blue gladiator named Farouk. Huh? It was so bad when Simmons first saw the costume, he thought somebody was winding him up. It failed, naturally, but as World Championship Wrestling started to pull ahead in the war, those across the way realized characters like this just weren't going to cut it anymore. So Simmons began dressing in Pan-African colors and adopted a more militaristic persona. The connection between his new pro-black Nation of Domination faction and the Nation of Islam was blatant. It came straight out of Louis Farrakhan's wardrobe and has stood the test of time in many ways. We still talk about them today, and that probably wouldn't have been the case if Farouk had continued to be treated like some sort of warrior from the past. Number 7, RVD. When a young Rob Zakowski wandered into Florida Booker Rob Slinker's office looking for work, the first thing on the table was his name. Thankfully for the plucky upstart, Slinker was a huge action movie fan and instantly changed it to the much cooler RVD. It wasn't just that this was a good idea though. Right down to the mullet, Rob had a resemblance to Jean-Claude Van Damme, and the two shared a love of kickboxing. All in all, it just made sense, and as Rob Van Damme slowly added in the RVD pointing hands to his entrance, it was clear how much potential this had. And RVD went on to have a pretty good career, really, didn't he? Maybe they can get together one day and share a cup of tea and watch the movie Kickboxer. Number 6, Adam Rose. Raymond Lepan's first stab at success in NXT came under the guise of Leo Kruger, a name adopted in tribute to divisive ex-South African president Paul Kruger. Thankfully, Lepan's character didn't follow in Kruger's footsteps, as WWE had already ticked that box with the troublesome Truth Commission faction, but he practically transformed into his next inspiration, which seemingly was Russell Brand. Studying how the comedian acted and returning as Adam Rose, a party animal who, yes, did look and sound like the British celebrity, it was quite the tribute to Brand, but really didn't do much for his wrestling career. He was a fun opening act for a while, but then after some controversy, Rose was released from the WWE. I don't know what he's doing now. Let's hope he's happy. Number 5, the Stalker. Forget the fact WWE brought Barry Windham in and made him the Stalker, which really was the most Vince McMahon idea ever. In 1996, the wrestler needed a leg up, and this was the idea. As he was less mobile than in his younger years, a gimmick was bestowed upon him in order to hide this, and the concept came in the form of Richard Ramirez, a real-life serial killer. What's worse, at one point the story for all this called for the Stalker to mimic reality and actually murder Mark Merrow's wife Sable to really kick off that feud. Unsurprisingly, Mero said no. That left Wyndham with not much to do, so he just became a dude that happened to be called the Stalker. It didn't last that long, mainly because it wasn't very good. Barry Windham probably should have just been Barry Windham. Number 4, Marlena. WWE's Attitude Era took Terry Runnels' character and made her one-dimensional. We all know what I'm talking about. Before Vince Russo arrived and did that, however, the original idea actually had some pretty good depth. Introduced as the valet to Goldust, Runnels' Marlena paid tribute to the real-life star of film noir Marlon Dietrich. Like her Hollywood double's greatest roles, Marlena was a seductive, cigar-smoking femme fatale who couldn't be trusted. That not only made her interesting, but also meant she was essential to this double act, which always presents more opportunities for storylines. Apparently, pudding matches were more important than this mind, and soon, that's what she was reduced to. Number 3, Clarence Mason. When it was decided that the Nation of Domination should have a mouthpiece, WWE went down the who cares about subtlety route and named him Clarence Mason before saying he should perform as if he was Johnny Cochran. If you don't know who that is, it was O.J. Simpson's lawyer. At the time of all this happening, the former football player was on trial for murder, and WWE thought it was a good idea to go and capitalize on it. I'll just leave that sentence in the ether. If you want even more info about this, there was also a discussion post the OJ trial to maybe use him on a WrestleMania. Whether or not Clarence Mason would have been involved, I don't know, but I wouldn't have put it past them. Number 2, the Jackal. Don Callis, who is now in control of Impact pretty much, used to look a lot like cult leader David Koresh. Because of this, he became the Jackal, with JR repeatedly telling us that yes, this was the WWE's answer to the man who believed himself to be the final prophet. Which sounds like a video game boss. Both talked in similar tones and had ambitions that were slightly over the top. Callis really brought into this as well, because rather than just look like Koresh, he wanted to head to the cult compound in Waco, Texas, where a police siege had happened in the real world and where Koresh had been killed. The plan was to whip up so much of a fuss, the police would have gotten involved. No one was surprised when this idea was turned down. Number 1, Jean-Pierre Lafitte. PCO wasn't always smashing it on the independent scene. Once a time, he was a pirate. Because wrestling. Thought up because Carl Ouellet had a legit glass eye, the whole thing was based on Jean Lafitte, a legendary pirate, and to be honest, it was all a bit rubbish. Throughout the early 19th century, Lafitte and his brother Pierre ran a highly lucrative smuggling racket out of LA, amassing a fleet of such might that it helped fight the British in 1812. His successor couldn't even have beaten the British Bulldog. And yes, that's a joke. Clearly somebody was a big fan of history, because one day when Jean-Pierre walked into WWE Creative, he was told this is what he was doing now. And it died before it even got going.